Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast with your host, executive coach, and culture architect, Dr. Joey Faucette. Discover strategies and tactics that work positive as Dr. Joey talks with industry leaders who create a positive work culture that attracts top talent and reduces team turnover. Discover how you can create a work positive culture that increases productivity and profits. Here's your host, Dr. Joey.
Hey, Work Positive Nation. You know, about 60 to 70% of my guests in these episodes of the Work Positive Podcast are, shall I say, guys like Gary Ridge and Jesse Cole and Julie Balke, people like that who work with a variety of companies and who are regarded as experts in their field, culture experts, things like that. 30 to 40% of my guests, I'm quite intentional about these percentages, by the way. 30 to 40% of my guests are persons that I refer to as expert practitioners. That is, they are also experts and are engaged with a company, right? And doing the kinds of things that create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits, that attracts top talent, and that reduces team turnover. And so today is one of these expert practitioners. He happens to be a fellow Virginian. That's right. We both hail from the Commonwealth, right? And there are just a few Commonwealths in the U.S., and we happen to be in one of them. He has the enviable task of living on the coast of Virginia. I wasn't quite that smart as to locate over there. My wife is from the area in which Dan hails, and so it may be before we leave planet Earth that we wind up back over towards the water. It's in her blood. My guest today also is a Navy veteran and served our country with honor and distinction. So we thank you for your service, sir.
My pleasure. Also
was an FAA controller, right? And did that for about 20 years in training. So you hear a massive background of opportunities here in which he's been able to discover how to attract top talent and reduce team turnover and create a positive work culture that literally increases productivity and profits for companies, because we all want our company to be sustainable, right? Right now, he is the business recycling coordinator for the City of Newport News. So Work Positive Nation, help me welcome my fellow Virginian and my friend, Dan Baxter. Dan, welcome to the Work Positive Podcast, my friend.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here, honored to be here.
I'm honored to have you. So if you're connected to me on LinkedIn, Dr. Joey Faucette is how you can search for me. You might have received, you most likely received a message from me recently just telling you that the Work Positive Podcast is available. Adrian has done an amazing job in letting everybody know that, and sending you the link to Gary Ridge's podcast. Well, the responses have come from all over the world, including the Commonwealth of Virginia, and Dan Baxter was one of those who responded. And so he began telling me about the kinds of activities, the management strategies that he has in leading the business recycling as the business recycling coordinator for the City of Newport News. And I said, Dan, this is golden. Would you please come on and share with Work Positive Nation about this? So, man, the honor is mine. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. So let's dive right on in. We're in a weird time right now. We're recording this in the middle of January 2023. I think we're in a weird time, Dan, and here's why I think we're in a weird time. We're seeing large companies, right? Massive companies laying off. And at the same time, we're hearing daily this, I can't find people to work. I can't find great people to work to drum a company. So it's almost like we've got a foot in two different places. It's like, well, you and I are from Virginia. You know, you can go to Bristol, Tennessee, and Bristol, Virginia, and be in both places at the same time, right? You can straddle the line. So it's almost like we're in two places at once here. How do you, as the business recycling coordinator for the City of Newport News, attract top talent?
Well, the interesting thing that, to your points, Dr. Joey, is that I get to see both sides of this problem because I'm dealing with thousands of businesses a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I provide a service, but I also connect them. And in talking to them, here's, companies like Ferguson Enterprises, 33,000 people.
Wow.
We've got the Huntington Ingalls Shipbuilding, which is equal in size. Okay. They can't find people in certain specialties. They can't. Then I've got small businesses, local bars and restaurants, small entrepreneurial firms like a company called Junk Luggers, which I was with yesterday.
Love
and
that
they
name.
can't find people. They can't find entry-level employees. The problem is transcending, and yet there's people out there. It's like, okay, seems to be the disconnect.
Yeah.
And here in the city, we've got a problem attracting, even though all the cities in the region, and I talk to cities throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we've got the same problems. Okay, we can't find people. We keep raising salaries, entrance salaries. And then if you do find people, it's a hard time. You're having a hard time keeping people.
Yeah.
Part of the challenge is what I call mentor up, mentor down. Okay. So I speak a lot in schools and organizations, schools and churches and things, and groups like civic groups. And many of them do not realize the jobs that, like the city has, that we can't fill. Good benefits, decent pay, fairly secure jobs. We can't fill the positions. And it's a challenge. So we have to go out there and we have to, my claim to fame is that I am willing to go out and talk to different groups and try to take the pulse, if you will, the barometer of what's going on and where people are. And when you talk to young people coming out of college, and again, I've worked with William and Mary, Christopher Newport, Old Dominion University, all these different schools. And I'm finding people that they can't find a job. They're telling me, I can't find a job. And I'm like, really? The jobs are there. They're online. You apply online. The process is there. The smaller entrepreneurs, again, it's a problem that's transcending society.
Yes.
We have kind of gotten away from teaching the next generations what we know.
And that's what you mean by mentor up and mentor down.
Mentor up and mentor down. So if you're a young person watching this podcast, what I would recommend is find somebody that's further along in their career than you, whether it's in your field or not. Find somebody that you can talk to that can give you some advice. If you're older and you don't have children or grandchildren, look at somebody that's younger than you and just engage them in conversation. Because you learn so much by listening and engaging them. Find out where they are. They will divorce themselves from their cell phone.
Yeah, eventually, if you catch them at just the right time. Well,
it's a fascinating point, but think about it. If you engage people, they will engage.
They will. So, man, I love this strategy of the way you attract top talent is to make yourself available in the communities and to universities to talk about what it is that you do as a business recycling coordinator for the City of Newport News, and then also to encourage people to develop these relationships up and down. By the way, I was mentored, the first time I remember being mentored by someone younger than me was when we had VCRs, and my 8-year-old knew more about programming it than I did. So I was
exactly
right there.
I have an 11-year-old that tutored me on something with my iPhone the other day.
There you are. Yeah.
Okay. And because she could do it. And she goes, Grandpa, give me your phone.
Just give it to me. I love it. So, man, what a great strategy for you to go out into the community and to seek opportunity.
For an 11-year-old, she instructed me on, okay, you do this, and then you hold your finger here, and then you do this. And it fixes the problem.
Yeah, she showed you exactly what to do. Yeah, but I love this strategy that you have instead of you staying in your office and expecting that the attraction factor will kick in and top talent will find you. You're out there in the community and you're serving others. And by that way, you're attracting top talent. I love that. So Dan, let's say that you are attracting top talent, that you're putting together teams that are doing meaningful work. People who are attracted to this whole notion of recycling and working with businesses to do that. How do you reduce team turnover? How do you keep people on those teams once you put them together, Dan?
Well, you have to listen. Okay. And you have to engage them. And sometimes you have to put the team into a non-traditional environment instead of the working environment. Just take them and put them into a, let's go out and grab a cup of coffee. Let's go out and have, grab lunch together. Let's go just do something non-traditional for half an hour. And what that does is it breaks down barriers. Okay, because then you learn, you don't have to be their buddy. You don't have to be their friend. But you do, as a leader, have to be friendly and approachable.
I love that.
Okay. And sometimes you have to tell people the brutally honest truth. But as a leader, part of what you have to be able to do is keep your finger on the pulse. So when a project is big and it goes sideways, what is the first thing most people in management, different than a leader? Okay.
Yep.
Managers want to blame somebody.
Yeah.
As a retired air traffic controller, I can tell you from going over air traffic controllers, in case you didn't know, when there's an aircraft incident or accident, people involved provide their information, but we take people from outside of that local environment and they become part of the investigating team.
Gotcha.
So when we do the investigation, so like pilots that are involved, we have other pilots that come in and listen and look and interview. And it's the same thing for the controllers. And sometimes you'll find that an incident, something that went wrong, was a chain of events. That unrelated chain of events that led to the incident, that if you had broken the chain at any point and broken the chain, problem would have gone away. Think about that in your life. Whenever something's gone wrong, and everybody does this, anything from getting stopped for speeding or running a stop sign or something, you play it back in your mind over and over and over again. And you're trying to blame something or somebody.
That's right. We play the blame game immediately.
Exactly. But if you go back and review the situation and say, okay, what could I have done to have stopped the situation?
Right.
Maybe nothing.
Yep.
But part of what I do with teams is self-reflect. People come and complain about something. It's, whoa. I'm happy to listen to your problem. However, come, self-reflect. Take a moment, take a breath, look at what's going on, and realize it's not the end of the world.
Even though it might seem like it in the moment, right?
It might seem like it in the moment, but then again, when you react to a situation, you just feed it.
Yes, you do when you react.
The conversation we were having, to the point that I was making in the conversation we were having before we went on the podcast, was working with teams is kind of like training a dog. You have to know what motivates people to get them to do what you want them to do. And then you make it their idea.
Yeah.
See, once you make it somebody else's idea to do what you want them to do, your work is over. All you have to do is kind of guide the cats in a direction. You have to put food at the other end of wherever it is you want to go. They'll go for food.
Yeah, I have to find the stimulus that works. And once that motivation is captured, then it's off to the races and your teams are highly, highly engaged. Well, I love that first skill of listen. That's the one that so many leaders run by, I think, is because I don't have time for that. How do you, Dan Baxter, ensure that you're listening in a way that reduces team turnover?
Shut up.
I love it.
And in the brief time that we've known each other, I'm a talker, but
Yeah.
Sometimes it is hard to throttle your brain back because somebody's saying something and you want to respond. And then you start getting ahead of the conversation, and now you're disengaged. You're not listening to your target. How many times do you hear that or see that even in your own relationships, husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend? The same thing's true in the workplace.
It is. And I think if I can combine a couple of things that are really like you're talking about here. First of all, listening. If we can combine that with drop the blame and pick up the claim, because that's the way I talk about what you're talking about. If I'm reacting in a situation and talking about it, then I'm seeking to CYA, right? I'm trying to blame somebody else so that I'm not held responsible for the outcomes. However, if I'm listening, it's far easier for me to claim, to use your word, self-reflection. It's far easier for me to claim my role in and take responsibility in that situation. So that's a wonderful combination of listening and drop the blame, pick up the claim. I love that as a way of reducing team turnover. So Dan Baxter is my guest today, Work Positive Nation. He is the business recycling coordinator for the City of Newport News, a practitioner who is obviously very thoughtful. And Dan, I mean, before this conversation's over, Work Positive Nation is going to be knocking your door down to come work with you, right? Because you're such an amazing leader. How do you know when you're getting it right, Dan? How do you measure for a positive work culture?
Good question. And it's a question that's oftentimes not asked. Okay? And it's not taught in a lot of management theologies, for lack of a better phrase. I witnessed this in my many years in the workforce is, this theology or that theology. And it's like, I get my guidance from people like you and several other people a couple of whom I know personally, who are motivators. They're motivational speakers. One of them goes to church with me, and he got shot 8 times as a Navy special operator.
Wow.
And I watched him overcome things, and I know his family, and I know him. And but the one thing he talks about in measurement is think of life as a spiral. Okay. So as you go up, you keep crossing the same points again, but not at the same level. Okay. So when I'm measuring success, it's like I'm looking at people in a project to see if they are pushing themselves to the next level. So when the team is just naturally building on its resources, and the team is the sum of its points, okay? If you want a team, you've got to build, if you're a leader, you surround yourself with the people that know what you don't know.
Hopefully.
Okay, and can do what you can't do.
That's right. Otherwise, you're in an echo chamber, right?
Exactly. And where a lot of young managers get, because they haven't been taught this. Again, it's a mentor up, mentor down thing in practice. Okay. So they don't have anybody to hold them accountable. But when your team is working, it's constantly trying to make the project better. They're learning from their mistakes. They're learning from things that, well, this idea didn't work. Why don't we try something new? Gotcha. But we don't go radically new. We go just a degree or so off the point to kind of, it's a sailing analogy I use. In order to sail a boat across the Chesapeake Bay from Virginia Beach to the North Shore, it's not a straight line.
Oh, no. We sailed out of Deltaville and went up to Crisfield, Maryland once. That was anything but a straight line.
Exactly. So you adjust your sails. And one of the other things that I want to point out on the measurement aspect of this is that the measurement is getting to your goal. It's not a straight line.
Yes.
It's how do you get to the goal? How do you build the team to get to that goal? And as the team grows and they're nurtured, they will keep self-improving. That whole self-reflection thing becomes ingrained in your team. Mm-hmm. And instead of looking to blame, it's like, well, this idea didn't work. But it didn't work because, now they're self-reflecting. It didn't work because, as opposed to, well, so-and-so had this idea was stupid. This person's a moron. This person has no idea what they're talking about. And they're telling us what to do, which happens a lot in organizations, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector. It happens a lot. So you break the cycle. Again, that's earlier discussion about breaking a chain of events. Mm-hmm. So if when you're constantly improving, no, you never hit the pinnacle of the perfect job.
Right.
You will never get there, which is fine. But you will be the best that you can be. Remember that upward spiral thing? You're crossing this point over and over again, but you're going up
at a different level. Mm-hmm.
When you've got them where you want them, they will constantly self-improve.
I love that. So the way that you measure that you're attracting top talent and reducing your team turnover is continuous improvement. We like to refer to it as a forgiveness culture, where you can make new mistakes faster. Right. And you're constantly learning, reflecting on previous experiences and how can we improve moving forward. I absolutely love that. Dan, what are some of the challenges that you're facing as the business recycling coordinator for the City of Newport News in creating a positive work culture?
Attitude. Management techniques that are being engaged in that are not really management. Okay.
What does that mean?
Well, leadership and management are two entirely different things.
How so?
Leadership is having your finger on the pulse, getting your team to a goal. Okay. Whatever that goal may be. Okay. Management is trying to keep things under control, which, by the way, the harder you control things, the less control you get. The more you put your finger, it's like trying to train a dog, and I keep coming back to this analogy. It's trying to train a dog that's pulling on the leash by letting them pull you. Okay, well, if you change directions on them, and every time they come, it's a very simple technique, but it works. Dog goes and pulls in one direction. You do an about face and go in the other direction. Then they come back up, run in the other direction. Then you keep doing this for like 4 or 5 times. And suddenly the dog stops running in the wrong direction and starts looking at you. It's like, what are you doing, you moron human? I'm trying to go over there and chase a bunny rabbit or a squirrel or my next door neighbor, whatever. Okay. Dealing with people is pretty much the same thing. Okay. Now, people are not dogs. However, left to our own devices, we see a squirrel, we're going to chase it. Mm-hmm. If there's something that gets your eye, okay, that shiny object, thank you. So that's a challenge. Shiny object, cell phone.
So shiny object syndrome, right? Okay. So with that being said, how do you address this challenge of attitude, Dan?
Accountability.
Okay.
Okay. And that's one of the other challenges is the lack of accountability. And accountability doesn't mean you fire somebody over something.
Right.
But if they're doing something wrong, you correct it or you bring it to their attention and let them correct it. Okay. But there has to be an accountability. You know, the church preaches forgiveness. Christ followers preach forgiveness. Yes, forgiveness is true. It's in the Bible. Yep. However, that does not mean you're absolved of the responsibility for the consequences of your action.
Yeah, and there's the acknowledgement of the action originally as well in that forgiveness culture. So accountability is putting enough pressure on someone to become their best self
There you go.
And that is claiming, right, their responsibility. And I'm going back to our earlier conversation, as opposed to blaming, and then listening to them and helping them, really coaching them to move forward into better behavior.
And good leaders are good coaches.
And what does that mean to you, Dan?
Okay. To be a coach means that you're trying to encourage your people to be the best they can be, to be better than yesterday. Okay. I don't want you to be perfect. You're not me.
I haven't known too many of those people. I knew a few who thought they were perfect,
but they were mistaken.
Yeah, but far be it from me to burst their bubble.
But that goes back to the whole self-reflection thing.
Yes.
So sometimes if you want people to be a clone of you, let them come to that on their own. I'll give you an example. Okay. This is kind of funny thing. My wife and my youngest granddaughter are like loggerheads when they're together. The funniest thing is that our youngest granddaughter is so much like her grandmother. It's disgusting.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
I have to sit the two of them together when we go out for dinner so that my wife doesn't look at the baby. She'll look at our older granddaughter who sits next to me, and she'll focus on her. But the youngest granddaughter will order the same with the same specificity and tell the server exactly, be very respectful, but she wants something. She wants a cheesesteak sandwich done a certain way, the way grandma does. And it's like, my son saw this for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and he goes, "Oh my God, they're clones of each other."
Yeah.
But, to that point, it's the same thing as with leadership, and I go leadership over management. Managers try to hold the status quo or keep something from getting out of hand. Okay. Which may or may not be the way you want your business or your team to operate. Yeah,
because sometimes you need that stasis, but most of the time with the rapid pace of change today, driven so much by technology, we've got to constantly be innovating and creating, right? Dan Baxter is the business recycling coordinator for the City of Newport News. Dan, before I get to what Work Positive Nation always wants to know from my guests, how's a good way for Work Positive Nation to reach out to you?
Well, you can reach out to me via email at dbaxt001@outlook.com, which is my personal email.
Okay. Boy, that's really nice of you to give us your personal email address. And if you're walking the dog or on the Peloton or something while you're listening to driving down the road and can't make a note of that, it's in the show notes. Just go to the show notes and you'll find it there. So, Dan, Work Positive Nation, as I said a moment ago, always wants to know from our guest, what's your one thing, Dan Baxter, that you would recommend to Work Positive Nation to do today to start creating a positive work culture?
I have a quote that I wrote down that I live by. And it came from my dad, but where he got it from, I don't know. Rest his soul. He who loses his head is usually the last one to notice it.
He who loses his head is usually the last one to notice it.
And the thing that I want people to come away from this podcast from, think about this: self-reflection over reaction. And the last, there's 3 points here. The last one is life's ambushes are inevitable. Okay. In the workplace, in your life, things are going to go sideways in a bad way.
Yeah, at some point.
Okay. Surround yourself with positive people. Find people around you, not maybe in the workforce, just maybe friends and family that you can just vent to long enough for them to say, hey, smack you upside the head and say, all right, snap out of it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You're not fixing the problem.
Yeah, we gave you 2 minutes of a pity party. Now let's move forward.
Right. Weather the storm, deal with the consequences. Remember, suffering is a choice. Suffering is a choice. And that doesn't mean that you are not going through a bad time or a bad situation. But if you're suffering, and oh my God, poor pitiful me, poor pitiful me, and people won't want to be around you. And yes, I've had some recent very bad trials in my personal life, and that happened one right after the other.
Sure.
And it's like, deal with it. That's what I did, was deal with it. And surround myself with people that are like, hey, if you need our help, we're here. And find the people that can help you, and surround yourself with people that can help you. You'd be surprised when times are rough in the business and the management, in leadership. Sometimes you need to have that person, that mentor up, to come back and say, hey, it's going to be okay. We can work through this. We can get through the problem.
I love it. So there are a couple of one things for us to do from Dan Baxter, Work Positive Nation, and that is self-reflect rather than react. And that self-reflection leads to response. And then secondly, surround yourself with positive people. Jim Rohn was my favorite business philosopher, and he was fond of saying that you are the average of the 5 persons with whom you spend the most time. So surround yourself with those positive people, and then get in there and be with them just as much as you can. Dan Baxter, the business recycling coordinator for the City of Newport News, has been my guest on this episode of Work Positive Podcast. Dan, I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for being such an amazing practitioner of positive work culture with the City of Newport News. I've learned a lot. I know Work Positive Nation has. Thank you for the gift of your time and wisdom today.
Well, it was an honor to present. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.